originally, like I have Persian roots, but I grew up in west of Germany in Essen, and for 8 years ago I moved at some point to Berlin. And originally I'm a media designer, so I don't have, like in the beginning I didn't have software background, but then I started directly to develop software. Have now 15 years of experience in the IT industry. Yeah, what I would like to do today is also to give you some insights about what kind of experience I have in case of remote work. And when I started my career, I decided also not only just to work 40 hours a week, I started also to study on the weekend, so which was very intense. And I did that on the bachelor degree and also on the master degree. And that experience somehow was nice, but also very stressful. So because it was a big change for me to work remote. I joined a very small company, so there were just we were together just 4 people, and everyone was working from home. In the same city, but everyone was working from home. The only thing what we did was that we had some kind of regular meetings, but not in an organized way like Scrum or something like that. What we did was always that we were sitting together on Mondays, having breakfast together, and planning the week. But it was very much self-organized. So that was the main thing what made it so easy for me to work in that kind of environment. And the second topic was that it was project related. So it was pretty clear for me in the beginning of the week what I need to do for this upcoming week. And I didn't have much dependency on other people. So only if I need some advice or if I need to talk to someone to get some more insights, then it was necessary for me to connect and discuss topics. But besides that, it was fully on myself. Somehow it was more or less like kind of freelance job, but I was not a freelancer, I was employed. And I did this for 5.5 years. And as I said, on the weekends, I was also studying. And I realized at that point, humans, they get used to everything more or less, like also to a lot of stress. And the work-life balance was at some point, from my perspective, a bit tricky because I realized I'm working the whole time. Like I have that the whole time in my head. I'm working longer, but I have the freedom, for example, to take care of personal stuff during the day, which was not possible before. So that was also something what I enjoyed. And in that time, I realized already it is still important to meet the people you're working with. Like this Monday meeting, which we had, that was really very nice because it had this kind of team feeling. And besides that, it was really self-organized. And then for a long time, I didn't work anymore in a remote scenario. And then Corona came and we had this situation again. And right now I'm working at Spectrum. I'm the CTO of Spectrum. Spectrum is a company which provides a platform, an AI-based conversational marketing platform. In easy words, it's the chatbot. So you can set up chatbots in the platform. And what we faced in the beginning was, we are not really prepared for remote work. It was unclear for us how complicated it will be. And we have a lot of young engineers also in the team who never had that kind of experience of working remote and from home. I realized also that for a lot of people in the beginning, it was very exciting, like a new kind of thing. And they were really open to do that and try that out. And we realized later that it was not too complicated for us as a company to move into that direction because all the services which we used already were remote, like SaaS solutions, and it was easy for us to move everything into Hangouts, Zoom calls, and all the software development and the communication was anyways often remote. So what we additionally realized is, again, this kind of company culture, which is very different when you work remote because you don't see the people and every person is different, right? So some people need that, some people do not need that so much. And we try to organize a lot of stuff, like besides everything what I think a lot of other companies also doing, like CrossFit yoga sessions. We did additionally cooking sessions. We set up a package for every employee, sent them per post and stuff like that so that they know, we are still here, the company is there for you. And to give them also always the understanding that we are there, we are together here in this kind of situation, and we will manage. It was definitely a bit tricky, but not so complicated as expected for us. And then at some point in Berlin, the situation was getting better, and we realized, okay, maybe now it's time also to go back to the office. And our CEO is always saying, like, this situation of Corona is a bit like toothpaste. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's nearly impossible to get it back in. So that's a remote situation also. Like, people enjoyed to work at home. For some, it was also a bit complicated, but it is very hard to argue at some point, okay, now everybody has to come back to the office. So we did surveys, we did a lot of conversations with the employees, and we realized, okay, most of the people, at least in our company, they really enjoy the teamwork, but the best solution for them is in the end a hybrid version. So that they can sometimes work from home and sometimes come into the office when it's really needed to see everyone in person. And that was in the end also what we decided. So for the future, we said we are the company which want to work in the direction of remote first. So you can work from wherever you want, but it should be just have like a time difference of 1 hour, so that at least we are at the same time there when we want to make phone calls. And the good thing is we have one office in New York. So there are 2 different kind of time zones where you can arrange yourself, even if you want to go on holidays at some point and work remote from the beach or something like this. So we try to give our employees as much freedom as we can in that direction and not force someone to come back to home or to the office or something like that. And for now, it works very well. What we need to do is to have a bit better organization of the office right now, because like there are not enough seats anymore, because the company is also growing, and we will set up something like a booking system for the seats. So whenever you need to come to the office, you can book a place and then have a meeting in person in the office. So that is the current situation for us. And as I said, like for us to have the freedom to do things remotely is something what we accepted, and we think it's also a very good thing. We take it in a very positive way, but we believe also that it's very important to have this kind of hybrid version to meet the people from time to time and have this kind of company culture still there. So that is my perspective from my experience. I'm pretty sure other people have maybe also other experience, but I would really discuss that in this round. So if you have any questions, also one of the other speakers, do you have similar experience? How is it for you?
I would agree on what you said. Yeah, also the analogy with the toothpaste is, I guess it's very valid. One question, I mean, we experimented a bit with remote and home office and so on, obviously before COVID already. But of course, COVID changed that massively in the last 4 or 5 months. And we have currently also discussions with the team that's going on about that. What I sense a bit is, and I would also fully agree that, these kind of bonding events, you need these kind of things. And I would also say not going to a completely remote first, because one teammate today said, when you're getting to a contractor mode, and it doesn't matter which company you work anymore. But apart from that, what I also feel right now, if you watch Slack, for example, the conversation level is going down in Slack step by step. And you got that kind of strange feeling, maybe we are losing contact to each other. And while we can't meet that well right now in COVID, we're thinking about right now, how can we bring us even remotely closer to each other? Did you have any experience like that in the last months, or are you doing actively something like that to get non-technical conversations running?
Yeah, like what we do is that we have regular meetings like every day, which is blocked for a coffee break, more or less. Like everyone can join this kind of meeting and then have a conversation. That's the easiest thing what you can do. It's not always happening. Like some people are busy at that time because it's optional for everyone. What we really, so what we do is we have quarterly planning weeks. That means every quarter, the whole company sits usually together and then they plan topics. So the whole company means like we have 30 people. It's not so much right now. We are not a huge corporate or something like that. In these kind of sessions, we do also team sessions afterwards, but outside. So with some distance and stuff like that, but the weather is nice, we go into a park, we have a pizza together, we have a beer together, so that we don't lose the contact to the people. And I think this is something what needs to happen on a regular basis. There are also other kind of tools. I forgot the name of the tools, but it's like a virtual office. That means you have constantly an online stream, audio, video turned on, and whenever you want to speak to someone, you directly can do that. So this is also something what companies are doing. We didn't do it now, but I did it in a company before, which works also good from my perspective.
The pizza or lunch meets you just mentioned, and you're also doing it during COVID.
So the pizza stuff was event-based. That means like every quarter we have one event to plan our quarter, and at that time we what we did is to meet then in person and have some food together. Right now the situation is a bit different, so you can book a place in the office, and then there are maximum 10 people, for example, in the office. And these people usually they go together to an office break. Anyone else questions or also comments?
I can comment. I had an interesting observation of my wife. She used to work holiday check before holiday check went fully Kurzarbeit. And when the COVID started, they had actually kickoff of the new quarter. And they did a normal kickoff or all-day Zoom meeting and so on. And then later they actually had like, I don't know, 2-3 hours of playing online games. And I didn't know this existence. There was a lot of like activity online games through browser, whereas actually the whole team could do the activities. They would drink alcohol and actually play some fun games. So that was also pretty awesome way of trying to keep connected to each other.
Yeah, very good comment. That's also a very nice idea. Do you know what kind of tools they or what kind of games they played?
I don't know. There's a lot of role-based, like someone is trying to guess the name of something, and then they need to interact or paint the doodles and so on. So it was pretty funny. There was some separate website. There actually was a list of multiple games, and they just created a group and then just can go through one to another.
I think that's a good point, Pablo. We actually, as Third Republic last night, had a virtual social. So we normally do socials once a month in the office. But obviously, with COVID, we've been running socials once a month, doing various things. And I don't know about everyone else, but online quizzes got quite tiresome very quickly. After you do one or two, it becomes quite samey. So we were looking at ideas of doing activity. What else could we be doing? So one of them was bingo. And then last night we actually done virtual Pictionary, which was great. Just again, if it's a tool maybe that you can use just to engage teams, completely outside of work, let's just do 1 hour on a Thursday night. They're definitely valuable.
I mean, we did also in the beginning some of these kind of events, not so much with games, but I think it's very important to have some variation in these kind of events, because if you do it always at the same time, like what we realized, this coffee break, for example, in the beginning, a lot of people were joining. And then later, after a while, not so many anymore. So you need to somehow organize that in a different kind of way, with maybe some kind of topics for all of these events to really organize that. I think HR, for example, in this kind of remote work, has a lot to do in that direction.
I'm from Audibert here. So I have the same experiences, right? That new things are always exciting. And once people get used to those things, they are less exciting. I wonder, however, if this is only true for this remote work situation. Because back in the days when I was working with Immobilien Scout, we had a weekly IT team meeting, a physical one, like a live one, in the big launch area, 150 engineers every week. And it was always the same thing. Everyone hated that meeting. Still people were getting value, but we were constantly discussing like how to change it, how to make it a better meeting. And then we did something new, and then it was exciting again for 1, 2, 3 times. Then it became less exciting again. So maybe that is more about human nature than about the challenges of remote work.
That's where I agree with that. What I would also say is that the situation on the computer is much faster, right? Like you can just turn it off, turn it on. And I think this is something what brings it to another level. But you're totally right, Frank. Thank you for that comment.
I would also agree, but what I kind of face right now is when we are all in the office, I have been in the office, you have conversations here and there, someone has a birthday and they get together, you meet at the coffee machine, have a chat. Somehow social interaction happens naturally and randomly somehow. And in remote setups, it doesn't happen anymore. And it's also a special situation that you are anyhow very often on the monitor of a day in Zoom meetings. And so you need to somehow break something in there. I would say in these remote situations, it's more important to at least have something to get people into social interaction, especially as some engineers are just more also introverts, right?
Thank you, Jörg. That's also true. So what we realized is also that a lot of people, like we use Slack, so a lot of people have some, or there are some private messages sometimes, and people do not have any kind of transparency if something is happening. So what we try to do with everyone on the team is to tell them they should do the whole communication always in public channels, so that everyone is involved, everyone can see this kind of communication. Otherwise, what we realize is the communication is only direct messages and something's happening, but not everyone is informed. So from my perspective, this communication part is also something what really need to be focused on to have everyone in place, because then you lose people.
Another thing that we actually use for Slacks is there's a donut. There's a plugin that you can actually, or a bot that you can add for free. They have some monetization under the hood, and they try to connect random people for coffee breaks, for lunches, and so on. And I think they're now in COVID even trying to move it further. And at Zoom, we created even a separate, because you can, in a paid version, I think, create a Zoom rooms, and we have a virtual coffee or virtual kitchen, I think, room where we have a separate selection of saying, hey, I'm coffee, who want to join? And then people just randomly, like I'm on my kitchen, I'm anyway on my kitchen making mocha, and then just chatting about some weird stuff. In report that I just, because the day before I just stumbled over some report about the remote work or just COVID work, and one of the things saying what people miss the most, 73% of people answered social interactions. And then what they did not like is less spontaneous connections. That's actually exactly what you guys just pointed out. Was I think everybody feeling the same way, and now somehow it's a market gap and possibility to create something that will help people to feel connected.
By the sounds of it, there's a common theme that the biggest challenge seems to be the smaller, like Jörg, you touched on it, Pavlo there, the smaller social interactions that, like you said, you get in the office at the coffee machine and birthdays and things like that, those impromptu 5-10 minute conversations that you get naturally, and they're organic. Obviously, when you're at home, they're obviously just by nature, they're not going to happen, are they? So it's, again, how can you foster that, really? Yeah, that leads on to Florian.
This is going to be a bit of my BCG heritage. It's a bit more formal than you, Raymond, but I hope it's not too repetitive. My thing is called Things to Remember When Moving to a Remote Culture. It plays a bit into the thing that we were already talking about. Just a short introduction. Who am I? I'm a freelance CTO. I'm in digital transformation. I'm an agile evangelist. I was the head of engineering of BCG Digital Ventures. I have built up Edgar Digital, and I'm helping companies that struggle with digital. So most of the stuff that I do is digital transformation and team building. What I realized over the last years when I was working with external teams and remote teams was that there are kind of three company types. It's a non-remote, this is like everyone is in the office, is the remote first, that started remote and do not have this missing out on coffee break because they never had it, and partially remote. And what's currently happening is a bit the transformation from non-remote to remote, and then also back, because sometimes people don't understand why and just did it because of COVID, which shouldn't be necessary, because what a lot of people don't understand is that remote first doesn't mean you don't have an office. It's just that everything is set up so that you don't have to be there. And that's one of the biggest changes that the people have to understand that are running, like especially in the C-level, is that you have to set up everything that you don't have to be there. What we want to do is we want to go there, and because I think we all enjoyed working from home. We really loved it. That's why everyone is thinking about that. But as said, it needs some kind of mind shift. And this mind shift is not just like you have to get to wrap your mind around it, but it's also about a cultural shift of your company. In this corporate environment. It said like corporate culture refers to belief and behaviors that determine how a company, employees, and management interact. So it's a lot about like a social interaction. It's your vision, it's the rewards, it's your environment, leadership, people, or org structure, and so many other things. But like if you sum that up, it's like the who, the how, and the why you and your company. The question that I'm currently like want to talk a bit about like is how do you maintain your culture when you transform to remote, as physicality currently is still scarce. And this is a lot about the how, and the how is a lot about communication, which in every company is different. So when you talk about communication, there are usually like two types of communication. So one is formal and the other is informal. When we go to like the definitions there, then it's a bit like formal communication passes through defined channels, communication through the organization. It's like meetings, it's your wiki, it's stuff that gets stored somewhere, but it's like it's set up in your calendar and things like that. And you have what you already said, and when we are talking about like a lot of informal communication, and this is the form of the communication which flows in every direction and moves freely in the organization. It's a coffee break, or it's the chit chat or grapevine talk, usually German called Flurfunk. There's a lot more. And what I would love to do with you is like a short thing in the chat is when you think of a company that has the size of 55 to 50 people, what is the percentage of informal communication that happens in a company usually on average? It's still good to see like what you write down and what the belief of the people is. It's 85% in average of your communication is informal in a company. And when you move to remote first, that communication, as you already like realized, is disturbed because you cannot bump into someone anymore, like at the coffee place or somewhere else. This kind of like look into the right and say, "Hey, Martin, do you know where that file is that we were talking like yesterday?" It's not happening anymore. The bar to go to like even just like on chat on Slack is still higher than just like looking to the right and talking to people. But because of that, I thought about it and came up with kind of like three suggestions on what you can do to help with that communication thing and keep them flowing. There are three categories there. There's like you have to formalize some information, you have to foster informality because people are social beings, and you have to pay special attention to some stuff. If you go through that, formalized information means that you have to have an information strategy. For example, like what goes into the wiki, what goes into the ticket, where do we store stuff, what is the file structure there, how do we chat, how do we use channel, how do we use threads, do we store protocols somewhere, is there any traceability of stuff that we have decided? Because what I realized when you think about it is, especially for chats, for me as a CTO, it's very, very complicated to follow what's happening in the chat. If people are not using threads or stuff, then it's just an endless list of things which I cannot, like, if I'm not reading that like the whole day, I will miss some stuff. And what should not happen is that this the classic thing is something goes wrong, and then afterwards someone said, but I wrote it on Slack, and hope that everyone got it. The last company that I because of COVID moved into remote, we set up something that every decision that has to do with the ticket goes on the ticket, even if that discussion happened on a chat or in Slack. That like information, for example, like stuff that we put on the storage was also linked into the wiki, so we had it so that we had it fully searchable, so that you could find things. And for me and for the other people in the C team, we used Confluence. These documents were updated. Email was golden because I could then afterwards like go through that things and see if I have to do something or I have to look at some stuff. It took some time to get people into that. This has to be here, this has to be there, and that has to go there, and to bring them together. That's usually not a bad idea for office companies also, but it gets especially necessary in remote environments, because otherwise the information gets lost everywhere. For example, I once was in a company, they had Jira, Asana, Trello, Google. With Google Storage, they had Office, stuff in a Confluence, and things on GitHub pages. This was an information nightmare. It all worked well as long as you could ask anyone like every second. But when they went remote, which is like 2 years ago, that was a horrible nightmare. No one knew anything anymore. And we had to work hard to get that put together again. A second thing in the formalization is a bit like you have to limit people to meetings and get a proper structure so that information is passed. It often happens in remote environments that people feel lost if they're not everywhere because there is no how information flows. But if you have a proper information strategy, you can then like move the people back into work mode and out of meeting mode. So for example, the PinCamp where I was last, like the first 2-3 weeks felt like you have to be everywhere. Everybody wanted to be in every meeting, which kind of stumbled a bit, like productivity stumbled a bit because of that. And then we started to get these things running in the information strategy part and like where we put stuff and then how things are transported to other people and as information. And that helped a lot so that not everyone was like, had FOMO of not being in the meeting. So that's about formalized information. You have to, in my opinion, then foster informality. So what you already said, what we did was we did a morning coffee. Everything was like optional, nothing was like mandatory. We had lunch meetings where we just like sat together and had lunch and talked some stuff. Cameras were off there. It was voice only because sometimes you don't want to see what other people eat. We had an evening chat, like just to give the day kind of a feeling of a start and an end, where also I, as a CTO, which I usually sit with my team and like get the daily talk on like how they feel and what's the mood there, which I was missing. Use this evening chat to like have just a short talk with everybody. Like, so is there anything you want to share with everyone? You were in a meeting today, which you think there was some important thing that is not like part of being a ticket or something that you want to share or how that felt. And then like we glided into chit chat and something. We had what you said, a cross-team game night, where we did something like virtual Pictionary. We had a FIFA tournament and stuff like that so that we still foster this social people being together. So we kind of try to mimic the social communication that you usually have. Last but not least, some stuff that I realized that I had to take special care of was like, as I said, all processes need to transform to online. When there is just one thing where you have to be in the office, then you're doing a bad job for the guys that are not there or can't be there. Like, especially when you then have really like people that are not living in Berlin, but you started hiring people from outside. That's not fair and shouldn't be done because it gives them the feeling of being like second-class citizens. And that's usually a thing that kills your culture. At the beginning, when you move, over-communicate, because we all know video is not the same. I must admit, when I do usually like speeches, I wander around and like talk with my buddy. That's not possible here. I'm sitting in a chair. And it's also like misinterpretations are so easy because like when I talk, I look into the camera, I can't see the other people. I can't see the reactions of all the faces. If you have more like 6 people in the room, you don't get when someone like is making a funny face or something like that. You don't get that. Someone makes a joke, but you can't see the face and then you don't know it's a joke and you feel offended. So at the beginning, talk about it and give everybody some slack in there. In terms of escalations, they need to be stopped quickly. As I said, like the mood is not very transparent in a video call. When someone like goes out of the line, step in immediately. So pay attention to that because that can go out of bounds like very, very quickly. And what I usually do is like when we had Zoom, I did stop some stuff, mute some people, did a breakout room, got them in one by one, said, okay, let's first talk. What was this? Let's have a talk about it and then try to smoothen the mood and then like later on get people together and talk about it. Because like what usually happens in an office after something like this is people bump into another at the coffee bar and then one says, I'm sorry for that thing before. I was just like irritated of something, and that's not happening anymore. So for us as leaders, I think we have to be there much more aware of that things like happen and do things there, and be aware that we have to react on that. And last but not least, 8 hours of video calls are exhausting for everyone. And what I did there was we changed the standard meeting time from 1 hour to 50 minutes. So that everyone after a meeting had at least 10 minutes of time, like to either do a bio break or do something else, or just get up out of its chair, so that like even when you have a bad day in terms of like meeting, you had some time where you could just like get up and do something, and you're not like moving from one to the next. So every meeting was time boxed to 50 minutes, like hourly meetings, like 5 or 10 minutes less, so that there were some space in between for people. And we tried not to do more than 4 hours a day. Even that means that we had to postpone some things, but it's like, it's often you see people in the last 2 of them, like at 5, they're exhausted. It's done. They're not listening to you anymore. And so you have to redo that anyway if you like think that this is it, that the information is valuable. Otherwise, you shouldn't do the meeting at all. Yeah, that's kind of my guesses of what to do when you deal with communication in terms of remote. Thank you for listening. And has anybody any questions?
You made an interesting point, actually. I've made a note of it there around accountability. I think that's a big point when you have this culture of remote working and you have tools like Slack, and people sometimes put whatever they have to say in Slack. And like you said, if you've got 100 messages in there, there's no way you're going to see all them. So, you then have a video meeting 2 or 3 days later. Oh, did you do that thing that I put on Jira for you to get done? Oh, no, I didn't, but I put on Slack. I put it in the thread on Slack so actually it's not my fault because I put it in there. Well, actually it's like, well, again, I guess it's less of a question. It's just more of a statement. How do you kind of still encourage that dialogue and that accountability piece, rather than people just saying, I'll put it on Slack, it's not my problem anymore, someone else is going to deal with it.
Exactly. That's what I said, is like, this is how you have to formalize some things more than you usually do in an office. And this is like where information and where like requests and stuff go. And that like work is a ticket and not something that you put somewhere in a channel somewhere. For the developers, usually it's not that big of a problem because they're like in 3-4 channels. But for us in C-level, it's like I can't operate 25 channels. There's no way that I do this in the daily business and read them all. I had a discussion like lately where I said like email is failing, use Slack. And I said, yeah, but Slack is just like 24 streams of it if you don't have rules on how to work on that. I was once in a company that didn't know how threads work. This was like chat on TV. This is like everybody was talking about everything. And you had to like, if you were not like at the start of the conversation, you didn't know like what it was about and which message belonged to what. This was like horrible, and they were all happy with it.
If you don't check your Slack for an hour before a video meeting and there's 3 threads going on, all with 50 messages in, you think, I can't catch up on all this. And yeah,
90% of it you don't have to, because this is like team chat and it's fine. But there have to be some rules on like where results or questions or something go. They're not just staying there. Hopefully you realize that they are magically in there.
It sounds like a generational thing. Because I thought it was just me, but I find Slack overused. So it's good for it sounds funny because it's not around for very long from my perspective. It's good for if you have an acute problem, so you need to do something right now in the field or something. It's also good to discuss things in an informal and quick way, so just you can discuss very interactively. But at the end of the day, you want to describe what has to be worked on. You want to sort of summarize things in a way that is preserved in a corporate memory and even in a formal way. And I always use tickets for that, not even Wiki, because Wiki only gives you the last version and you never know how old the information is if you look at it.
I also think about it, if it's a generational thing. On the other hand, I think also that it's something like if we are usually getting new media, we're just using them somehow, but we are very often not thinking about what is the right media for the right communication. And Slack is basically, in my opinion, the same. It's, if you want to persist information for others in a traceable way, Slack might not be the best idea.
I think the search is very good. It's just not digestible if you're not online all the time. for me, at least. Like in C-level, like I have meetings where I can't look at it all the time. So, and also like when you have then people are 2 days like out of office, you never scroll back 50 pages if you're not there or on holiday. But you can have a look on the tickets, what was decided and how to do that. And especially if like you have a conversation in the team, like 2 people talked about how to do this and that they're not writing that down on the ticket and the ticket is taken by someone else. We're in Scrum or in Agile. You just pull something from the top and then you don't know what they already discussed because it's not there. There is some kind of formalization that you have to do as a CTO. We say, okay, stuff that belongs to has to go there.
That's what I mean. I mean, yeah, what is the medium you use for which kind of information or communication?
Exactly.
I think about this quite a lot, but it's difficult to get these points across.
I agree with that. What I realized is also like this kind of chat flow, it's usually often temporary. So everything what should stay there for a longer time should really, as Florian said, should go into a Jira ticket in a comment or something like this. And I realized like maybe one of you guys have also some experience in open source projects because they are also usually all of them remote. They organize themselves also somehow in IRC channels or whatever. The main thing is that they organize themselves in comments and in Jira tickets, and everything what is important is really very strict structured from my perspective. I don't know if you have other kind of experience.
If it's small, no. At the moment it's more than 10, yes.
From my experience, we used all the companies I've worked in, we used Slack a lot, but we only used it for direct communication. So the channels were actually just like almost no traffic in it, and people were doing like group chats or one-to-one communications in Slack, and the outcome of what they did, they put in a ticket. So if they were talking about how they do a certain implementation because the point thing didn't work, they basically put it into the ticket, and that actually worked great because everyone could see the outcome of that because we had a little bot, a Slack bot, which show updates on tickets that are not closed. That was also helpful. So actually people could see in a certain channel, which they mostly muted, so they could check it on demand, that actually stuff was done on a ticket, but they never communicated big time about a ticket in some developer channel because there was just like people would just exit the channel because it's hard. So it's like all of us, like we're not that old, all of us. So we all used IRC chats when we were younger. And that's the same thing. Just assume that if you close the window, everything that happened has been gone. So it's just a damn chat. That it has a history function is nice, but don't rely on it.
I found myself spending a lot of time, not actually looking at Slack as it's happening live, but just kind of every few hours go through and grazing and seeing what's happening, looking at different threads, and then saying, oh, is there a ticket for this one? So did this conversation finish now? And just kind of really randomly moderating. I'm missing a huge amount of stuff, but just then using the force of reminder, people are, oh, Paul's going to come and check, we should make a ticket for this. And actually, if there's a ticket, then I don't even usually bother. I might look at the ticket if I care, but I found this was actually a good way of not really policing it, but yeah, I guess lightweight policing of Slack channels seems to work.
We had the rule that we used the Jira plugin, and when we did something out of a chat into the ticket, we linked the ticket into the chat so that if you search for it, you can see that it was already done.
So I'm Paul Hopton. Until exactly the beginning of April, I was the CTO at Relayer. So I was engineer number 1 and grew the team to about 125, 130 engineers across 3 locations. I decided it's time to move on, but I went through a lot of different kind of transformations of the team, a lot of different techniques, a lot of different kind of problems to solve. So actually I have almost nothing to contribute about managing a big team in COVID because I've missed that pain. I have been doing some advisory work for a small team based out of Munich. And I had, I don't know, has anybody met a team? So basically I met a team who I'd worked with for 3 months in flesh for the very first time. And it was an extreme virtual reality-like experience. They were all much taller and more three-dimensional. And it was literally, I hadn't seen any of them ever before. One of the topics when I first talked to Richard was one of the things that came to mind was a technique which we had for reformalizing some of our teams to actually overcome a sense of weariness and tiredness and everydayness about life that had crept in. to actually start to get everybody more excited about and the sense that they're working for a startup again. And we introduced this concept of engineering speedboats, so a way of getting rid of engineering malaise. And I thought that would be a good thing to share. Again, I can't report firsthand how that worked during COVID, but I have heard third hand that actually the speedboats worked especially well. So the whole idea is building speedboat teams, bringing creativity, innovation, enthusiasm back to organizations that have gotten tired. When I first presented this internally, people showed me pictures of kind of like, Marines in speedboats and stuff, but I showed them kids and people having fun and girls in bikinis and everybody having an awesome time on speedboats and said, look, this is about moving fast and having fun again. I introduced myself already. I've been 26 years in tech. I've now, 2 weeks ago, I became German. So, hey, ich bin eine Deutsche jetzt. So, thank you. Once your team reaches a certain size, and even if, so we had 120 engineers at Relay, or still do, but kind of the biggest on-site team was around 60 people working together and, cross-functional, mixed, very mature, stable structures. We could look at the burn down chart. We knew what was happening. The agile coaches were really happy. Everything was really predictable. When we could set really long-term goals and start working towards them and, measure our success towards them. Everything really smoothly oiled, well-running engineering department. But there was problems. It felt really slow moving, and the dynamic nature of the business meant that sometimes we'd need to turn, and we found ourselves incapable of turning as an engineering organization. And really, when we decided to do something, make a big thing, became a very heavy commitment, and changes became expensive. It felt that, we were an oil tanker, moving in this direction, moving a huge amount of stuff very efficiently, but no fun. Symptoms and causes are often hard to differentiate. We found often that there will be rewrites of major groups of services that just seem to take an incredibly long time. Groups of engineers will become obsessed with infrastructure and improvements and restructurings. We felt that people were no longer thinking about the user, or because we were doing B2B software, the people who were buying it, they were becoming more or less obsessed with parts that they wanted to do. Probably definitely a cause more than a symptom was, the need to continue to add enterprise grade features, which are not things that people are necessarily excited about. And the product roadmap became a little bit stale. And then what you start to see is a lot of different kind of conflict. So the designers start to get really upset with the front-end engineers, and the product people aren't happy. And you start to see a lot of conflict coming into place because there's this inertia that's crept into the organization. And then we saw these things, which was people's motivation going down, the speed was going down, the number of errors were going up. So not necessarily, again, we had quality QA in place, so it's not QA problems, but the wrong thing happening, the wrong work being done, the wrong ideas. And we started to lose people. We saw that there was exhaustion. People wanted to do something new. So it became really valuable to start thinking, how do we defeat this inertia? So we came up with this idea of speedboat teams, because we were thinking about what's different from an oil tanker or a speedboat. You can have a speedboat which can go really fast, and they can be, you can have them turn quite quickly, but only if you don't have too many people inside them, because otherwise everybody falls out the boat. They can be kind of quite cheap. We're not talking about huge teams. We think about just a couple of people really working towards something, and they can take risks much more easily because they're not driving the whole ship. And making a commitment to something is a lot more lightweight. This team deciding to do this helps to be more carefree in the way that you program. So really, what we started to do was think about this, and the numbers all shifted around, and we worked it out. What we actually discovered is that you can get to a functional call with just 3 people: product owner, front-end engineer, and a designer. And actually, that's all you need to start producing new feature sets incredibly quickly. By actually moving everybody else into the background, we were able to do incredibly fast iterations across software. We still had the bulk of the team working on the tanker, working on the big projects, working on the infrastructure, working on major infrastructure rewrites, boring B2B features. But by having these 3 people working incredibly tight loops, often coming together initially in the office, but then later kind of on Slack and having a very small thread where they were talking almost non-stop to one another, we're able to really produce things in a very kind of tight turnaround. We created these teams and said, if you're on this team, you may be only half the time on it. Designers, we found spending all time in the team didn't make any sense, but half the time in it. We found that, getting this commitment in place and the motivation of the team was easy. So having a back-end engineer was usually needed because we still need to provide services that could be used for building the front ends on top of it. We still needed QA, because we wanted to still delivering working software every week. We needed to have the QA in place and running ongoing. Same for documentation. The agile coaches didn't necessarily like it at the beginning because, again, we were ripping up all of the big plans, but they actually also got to be quite motivated about, on a super high speed level, resolving problems as they occurred with teams. So we moved around about a third of, essentially about half of the Berlin team and a third of the Munich team to working in this methodology. We said to everybody, if you're joining a speedboat, we want you to commit to being in it for a quarter. And at the end of the quarter, we can decide who wants to go back and working on reintegrating some new features on the back end or doing whatever they were doing before as a process to say, this isn't, I'm not commanding you to do something else. This is maybe not how you were thinking about you're going to be working with us, but to create this kind of lightweight form to move things forward. And both things ran in tandem. And really, by doing this, and it took us, a couple of quarters of really hard work to kind of fine tune it, we got back to this point where we had really great levels of engagement and a sense of purpose, especially for the folks working in the speedboats. We resolved all sorts of relationships. The conflicts that were going on between front end and the design team disappeared because they were working, simultaneously on the same pieces. And had to throw away their process, which they all hated. We got a bunch of brand new feature sets, which we could then start putting in front of customers much more quickly than we were doing before. And what we noticed that surprised us as well was that even the people who weren't on the speedboats suddenly start to become a lot more productive and a lot more engaged because they could sense the speed. And, they could feel the wind in their hair as the speedboats went past as well. It was a really useful piece to actually get excitement and activity back in the organization, and it carried us through into the beginning of the Corona time, I know, very well, and from what I hear, it's still working very well now. So it was something which I thought would be an interesting thing to share. As your team gets too big and too difficult and becomes slow and boring, then it's good to actually put fun back into it to innovate again. So I wanted to share the idea, but definitely happy to talk about it more, and maybe somebody's had similar experiences.
I have similar experience. Like, I was working in a company and I was one of the very first engineers at that time. And within 3 years, we got, 30 different engineers. And we realized after having more than 8 people, we were more or less in the same situation, that it's getting somehow complex. So we had also look on different kind of methods. I mean, Scrum, Kanban and stuff like this is always something what you can use. Mm-hmm. But we looked also into that kind of concept of Spotify with squads, chapters and tribes, which was also very interesting because the main idea for us at that point, maybe on the speedboat, is also the same, that you really empower the people so that they can move fast.
I mean, that was the interesting thing, is because we already had that. We already had our Spotify Plus model, and we were already working in a super agile way. But at the same time, we could no longer get the velocity. And actually, I think the major thing was to actually move from an average team size of 10 to 15 down to maybe 4 to 5 people, plus some people supporting part-time. And actually, that was the decisive piece. And again, rip up the roadmap. You just do this for a month. So it was a case of kind of having a much more radical version of the Spotify thing that worked.
Interesting that you mentioned team sizes. I actually had a fun experiment in my current company where I did an abstract KPIs. I just was trying to measure predictability, or like what is teams committing and what's the delivered and what's the ratio. As a main metric. And in some point, because I had a lot of discussion with the business, we said, okay, let's start also in parallel, see what perfect Mondays can bring us or whatever. And actually just from reports start pulling, okay, what was availability of the people in some specific of time. And the fun outcome, I had the best delivery when I had at least 80% of people in-house. So when I had less, of course, there was a delivery which shrunk. When I had actually more, the delivery also would shrunk, because what it mean, I had actually too big teams. There was too many opinions and teams had too many decisions to make. So that I just cut it, reduce amount of developers in each team, so cut it in a little bit more granular, and it's make a nicer delivery flow. But that was some kind of, I would say, a proof of concept that too many people is also bad.
Yeah, there's there's this nice matrix where you can actually, the number of people in the teams, you have the lines connecting everybody, and the bigger team, the more, the more connections, the more communications, the heavier it is. So, yeah, and we saw that totally happen.
At a certain size, you can only get speed through any form of parallelization. There's also, so this will give you speed if you're smart and say, you guys over there work on that piece, and you over there work on that piece, making sure that they don't have to talk a lot. If they have to talk a lot, you have not cut it smart enough. On the other hand, this will also then create a cultural problem, which we all know is like siloism.
Yeah.
But you cannot have the one without the other. If your company grows, this is what you have to suck in, this level of siloism to a certain degree to get the extra speed.
One thing that you have to get on your culture then too is that every one of these teams has this kind of like feeling that every other team is a customer and treats it that way, so that you are holding APIs stable. You have to treat everyone like he is a customer and like give them help on delivering it and trying to make it. So you productize it more onto a feature level, so that that these feature teams get building a product which is part of the bigger project, like a module, but still from a mindset like a product that they deliver to customers, internal customers, but customers.
And I think it's really valuable to think about actually what's the life cycle of the team as well, because you also find, we often found that you have a team that come together to build a relatively small feature set, but they keep perfecting it. There's always more work to be done. So it's actually, okay, in a quarter, this team's gone. You're out of here. So you can siloize as much as you like, but then it's out of here. That gives you maintenance problems later. But again, if this team's super small, then they still have to go outside of the team for code reviews, which has, again, disadvantages, but keeps it quite tight. That's is life cycle of the team is a huge challenge. And nobody ever thinks about the team mending, but that's actually a really valuable piece to think, what's the earliest point we can stop this team existing and have them do something else?
We had a CEO after Scout was bought by Herman and Friedman and Blackstone, I believe. So they brought an Australian CEO, Greg Ellis, and he actually came and say, guys, I cannot do the structure or classic organization when everything cascaded top down. So he cut it us into market segments, or in this way, each segment was a division, and this division had own specific customer group. In my case, I was working at AutoScout, and my customer was car manufacturers. And what they actually did was pretty nice. So they give us independent budgets and said, okay, guys, we trust you. We have specific procedures in place, so you could do any steering, any plan, but we would actually meet on 90 days, and you need to present. So 90 days was enough time to turn the ship around or to make mistakes. But they give us autonomy, said, okay, this is your budget, try to improve your revenues, and we see how it goes. And then it's also by splitting it into division and sub companies, it's helped them to optimize the business later, because they saw then which customer group was actually bringing most revenues, which not, and some survived, some not.
The most important aspect of it, actually, so I'm so happy that you touched on that, because those market segments, they were full-flavored business units. And they had every kind of function in the company in the business unit. So everyone had a bit of sales and marketing and product and IT, and they all had their own budget, which you said, and they all were responsible for revenue. So they were all sitting on a revenue stream. And the siloism in the end created some competition between those market segments even. Some would not make it. They were not like economically viable. If you didn't make it, then your team might end up working for another market segment, because that's just more value delivering for the whole company. I liked that model a lot, though it also was very stressful, and people were, to a degree, some of them were feeling stressed out in that model. But for me, that was the logical conclusion. It was agile in the way that you bring the model of like running a company close to the customer and making economical, reasonable decisions at every level. I really like it.
And we had a different flight level, so we split it operational with strategic level to turn the ship around, and we would meet each segment, each head offs on 90 days, and we had a possibility to pitch and do the adjustment to different segments. What I saw after because Inbox Scout and Auto Scout was a legacy, so it were not companies that was just built out and born being with the market segments. There was actually some legacy systems, legacy procedures that was already in place. And I saw in the first years, there was actually, for some of my colleagues, was super hard to be autonomous. They got all that freedom, but they didn't know how to use it. And that was a really interesting experiment. There was a lot of involvement of ThoughtWorks and Minixite, and they were teaching other teams of like, okay, how to use your freedom. And that was the main learning curve. And only after that, after so many years, the model started being viable.
Freedom is one of the hardest things to cope with.
Question for Paul. How did you choose the targets for the speedboat teams? I mean, you're talking about engineering, right? So probably you had the relayer baseline infrastructure and then doing specific project for customers, or was that completely different? Did it integrate into the architecture with a lot of connections?
The contract was, use everything that we have in place already, use our existing front-end frameworks, use the back-end stuff. If you need to build a service, then if you need to build a service and you don't have enough back-end folks on your team, then we'll let it out to the core team to build for you. So the whole goal was, from a technology perspective, we were not really necessarily doing anything major in terms of rewriting it, but much more focused on adding new features. So it was very much, I also had responsibility for engineering and the product team. So worked very closely with the POs. They were the ones actually needing the most effort to free their minds to start moving forward, to say, well, look, yes, we don't have all the information. Yes, we don't know. And yes, we could spend 2 months producing, doing customer research and producing paper prototypes, or we could build working software in the same period of time and see what happens with it. This was kind of, a little bit of a challenge, but I think with one exception, for all of the POs, it worked extremely well as well. It actually changed their way in terms of how they thought about working with the engineers. And yes, we chose the targets not completely randomly, but it was like looking at feature sets which we felt was a lot of value in, but it was very difficult for us to assess it without having the software. So we looked specifically at some bootstrapping problems, things where it's like, okay, let's have a traceable or POC implementation of this, and then we can really connect with people. They were all adventures, and I said any one of these things, nothing. It was also the three things: anything that we write in the next 3 months probably won't exist in 6 months' time. We'll end up rewriting it once we really know what we need to do, but that's okay.
So it's also an innovation process, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Since it was, I guess, a change management, so you brought a new idea. How was it received by the teams, and how did you overcome resistance and so on? So how it was accepted, not accepted?
So it was, change management was exactly the right process. So it was certainly talking to, really getting people on board with the idea, from overarching team leads, then down to the individual team leads as well, doing a lot of work with the product team. I had a really great, my management team and my next level down were really good, and I really got them on board without too much trouble with the whole concept. And then it was a case of rolling it out. It was fairly big bang, but with lots of room for consultation. And because we came up with a model of who we felt should be on speedboats, really based on talking down to, who really needs a change, who doesn't. And we came up with a model and said, but this is just our idea. This is voluntary. We'd like you to talk about it and really let's spend the next 3 days, everybody thinking about this and thinking if they're comfortable with where they sit. And then we can do some horse trading. I exerted power. I said, this is going to happen. It's already been discussed. This is just the nature of what it is, but how you engage with it is up to you. And then I think we had a period of probably the first 4 weeks where we had to really micromanage a lot just to kind of get people moving in the transition phase. But after that, it became more or less a self-managing process. And we had good, at the end of this kind of first major iteration, when people's commitment for the quarter was over, then we had a lot of people wanting to be on speedboats, but a reasonable number wanted to leave as well. We successfully, one piece of work one major piece we decided to continue developing, and we got some good feedback from the market on it. One of the things we killed, and one thing we decided was just done. It didn't need any more work. It was good enough as it was, and then everybody moved on to the next thing. So it was, there was a certain amount of measuring, asking about the results at the end.
Little speedboats or these little teams. Based on your experience, what kind of level of experience did these kind of engineers or designers have? Because from my experience, it was always like that. When you have juniors inside of this team, then it's really tricky because they need usually someone who takes them by the hand.
What I found was, so junior wasn't involved. I think, no, actually, that's not true. On one team we had a junior, but then they played a junior role within that team. She came on as a junior front-end engineer, she was then paired up with somebody who was a mid to senior level. For the designers, we had mid-level people working involved, and the product owners were all had experience as well. So, I mean, we generally had not too much of a drama with people who were too junior in it, but it's something you would definitely have to watch. I think but it can also flip the other way as well, as if you have somebody who's too junior and is perhaps too over enthusiastic, then things can also run away as well. So let's rebuild all of this stuff, because they never made the mistakes before. It's can also be challenging. So not necessarily too much timidity, but not enough fear.
Did you lose a lot of people during the transition, percentage wise? I guess some people didn't want to change. That's normally what's happened and left, yeah. Or you managed to keep all the stuff?
We kept everybody, because again, we had, there was still a lot of work that still needed to get done in the traditional way, and this was really adding an extra layer on top of it. So people who were really, I'm really comfortable with this major refactoring effort that we're doing, and that's where I want to stay. That's my focus. So we're able to do that when we decided who should join a speedboat team, as that was one of the things we thought about. And again, I think there was a little bit of switching right at the very beginning, but it stayed stable. So we kept both systems.
Because I mean, when I'm thinking about our Scout times, we lost at least 60% of our crew. New investors on board, a new CEO, he came and say, okay, we cannot sell .NET and you need to change something. We cannot sell data center, you need to change something. The biggest problem was to actually educate all the .NET people how to use a MacBook with a console. And there was a lot of people saying, okay, I want to continue my path with VMware, and AWS is not fun or something like that.
We had a painful, again, change management, but everybody was fully consulted, and it was like a huge topic for a long period of time. But there was a lot of business reasons why we wanted to move from AWS to Azure. And obviously there was a lot of technical concerns, and we actually spent almost a year assessing and analyzing it. But then actually, as is often the case, analysis and tests are all good, but once you start getting things in production, there was a lot of really extremely painful phases to go through, and that cost us a lot of people. I think big changes in your underlying technology are always going to be really painful.
Did you choose the image of the speedboat because moving fast, you still can't break things apart from the speedboat? Oh.
Yeah, it's not a no-risk situation. If it was a rowing boat, then I really like the idea of fast, but I was also really, we said, if you put too much baggage in a speedboat or too many people, then it's going to capsize, and everybody gets wet. So it was a real conscious thing about not too much, not too many people, keep it fast. It's even too much turning and the thing will flip over. So.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate your time. Thanks, Payman, Florian, and Paul for speaking.